Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. Back with me on today's show, Paul Taylor, Mr. X. Paul, welcome back to the show, my man.
Good to see you again.
Always. Hey, got a lot of exciting things coming up. For all you that have joined us again on the show, hopefully you have been listening and you've been hearing and seeing some of the stuff we've been talking about leading up to here. And I know that we jump around, and what I mean by that is sometimes we have other companies on the show, and sometimes we have Paul on, and then we have Jamie on. Sometimes we have both. This will probably be an episode that we revisit again with Jamie and you. I think that would probably be a pretty good, because I'd be curious to see if he sees the same things that you do.
Yeah, I can't believe this is the first time you said this. Like, why hasn't there been an episode that he's been on that you said, you know what, we should revisit this with Paul sometimes?
That's not true.
Or maybe
at all,
he's
Paul.
just a subject matter expert, and
we've had plenty of those conversations. Don't be so sensitive.
Just throwing that. Well, you know me when I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. Anyway, folks, thanks again for joining us on this episode of ZERT Coffee and Chaos. This, as usual, has been recorded for video on YouTube, and it is obviously up on Spotify and Apple and wherever else you get your podcasts. So if you are interested in seeing the video, just head over to YouTube, hit the like, subscribe, the bell. You'll get notified when we put these out. But today's episode, obviously, it stems from a conversation that you and I had, and you and I talk often about training and within ZERT, obviously within your company, your brand, the training that you have seen throughout your time, obviously as an instructor in the military, training with ZERT. There are a bunch of scenarios that we're going to kind of go into. But today's episode stemmed from something that you just experienced over the weekend, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think about. And it's funny that you brought up Jamie, because I guarantee you we could all probably sit down and talk about this. And this conversation could probably last for 4 hours just from
exactly.
His experiences. And you could probably have this conversation with almost anybody. And talk about a number of things that we probably wouldn't even bring up. It's just that I just happened to, this weekend.
So you shot a match this weekend, and so did Jamie. And obviously there were two different kinds of matches, but I think it was both of your first time shooting a match in 2 years. So I would be curious to get his feedback, and maybe he'll chime in the comments below, or we'll just have that conversation another time with both.
Well, I have a feeling we're just going to delete this whole thing and do this again with Jamie.
No, we're definitely not. We're going to have part 1 and part 2.
All right, sounds good.
But guys, what we're talking about today, listen, scars are cool, right? Chicks dig scars. It's from,
and I got tons of scars, but I don't think these scars are cool.
No, these are not, but it's from a line from the movie. But what we're going to be talking about today are training scars. And I'm going to let Paul kind of give you a little bit more of a in-depth explanation as to what a training scar is. And it doesn't have to just be firearms. I think it's just in general a training scar.
Yeah, I think anything that you could you do, any activity, any hobby, any driving, we develop these particular, I don't even know what to call them, habits. We develop these habits that are necessarily you're used to doing something so many times, and we're talking about shooting right now in a training scenario, that when when it hits the fence, some of these habits could be detrimental to your health and your survival.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I ended up dealing with this weekend, just because of one of the habits that I've been doing for the last 2 years. And what's really important is the first thing I think is to identify it, because
Right.
there's so many people that do things and they don't identify these habits, and it could cost them when, if the
Okay.
time comes.
So let me ask you this. How quickly did you identify your habit this weekend? So
Not quick enough.
not quick enough.
Not
Okay.
quick enough to do
Yeah.
anything about it until, I shot a match, and it was a so read you mind if I read into this a little bit or
No,
give
go
a
ahead. Go ahead.
scenario?
That's the whole point. That was the
Okay. If we got a couple minutes, so I'll go ahead
just a couple, right?
and I know what training scars are. I mean, I've developed them in, you know, so many different scenarios, but in this case,
Right.
I haven't shot an IDPA match. I've shot quite a few outlaw matches and, certain local matches, but an
Yeah.
actual sanctioned IDPA match, I probably haven't shot one in 2 years. So I
Right.
figured, you know what, I haven't shot with this group of buddies in a while, and had an indoor match locally. I was like, man, if I'm going to do this, I might as well just completely screw this up. And I decided to shoot a revolver. I've never shot a
Oh,
revolver in a match before. So
wow.
I'm like, I'm like, I'm going to finish last in this match. I know, but
Well, I mean, just to kind
I've
of,
been
just
I've
to
been
kind of give
training
it,
on a revolver for a while. I've
right.
been practicing reloads. I've been shooting.
Sure. And I understand that. But I mean, let me ask you, and I'll probably do this a couple times as you're going into this. I mean, these stages at these matches, are they designed for a specific firearm, meaning a pistol versus a revolver? Again, I'm asking, and I'm asking you that question so people that aren't maybe in the know, they may not understand, right? So the round count for each stage and the way that the targets are they designed more for a
I don't
pistol
think there's
shooter
a
or a
single
revolver?
match out there that is designed for a revolver ever.
Right.
So I'm already set myself
Cowboy
up
act.
for
What
failure.
about cowboy action? I think that's the only
Well,
thing,
yeah, I
right?
think that's probably the
Right.
only
That's
one, but they got two revolvers, so they don't have to really worry
all
about
right.
reloading and
So
everything.
right off the bat, you set yourself right up for failure.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I kind of knew
Great.
this. I've seen revolvers. We all sit back and we're all like laughing at the revolver shooters. It's
Okay.
like holy, because they got to do 2 to 3 times more reloads than everybody else.
Right.
You can in
That's
IDPA you can only have 6 round cylinders, and I think USPSA it's 8. But I have a race revolver, so I bought one. I teach classes. Sometimes when I teach my wear and carry classes, if everybody shows up and half the class has a revolver, I get that out. So
okay.
I'm sitting there and I practice my reloads. Drawing this thing. With a revolver, it's not a you don't have a nice 1911 trigger on this thing. It's a double action revolver, so you got a huge trigger pull.
My
You've got
God.
to figure out how to reload.
Yeah, you're pulling a pound out at a time for
So
a
let's just say
while.
it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun, especially my
Yeah.
first match back.
Okay.
And I've been
All right.
shooting with these guys for a while, but
Okay.
they're all looking at me like, "Why are you shooting a revolver?"
Well, you know what?
And there are
Sometimes you
some
got to test
benefits. There are
yourself.
definitely some benefits to shooting a revolver, and I can
Okay.
get into that.
All
So,
right. So right off the bat, you know that you're going to challenge yourself, and you know that the outcome of this match is not going to be great. Now that's before you even identify the training scar.
oh yeah, yeah. I have my own range, so I'm
Yeah.
out there shooting on my revolver, or shooting my revolver. But when I'm shooting targets, I'm not really thinking about, I'm as cheap as the next guy, and I got a really good deal on B-27 targets. So the FBI B-27 target, I'll slap a bunch of those on, and I'm,
Okay.
bullseye shooting. I'm practicing my reloads. Then I
Right.
shoot at some steel if I don't feel like putting paper targets up. So I'm actually shooting this thing quite a bit and getting,
Okay.
how I feel. I'm not Jerry Mishlik fast by no
Hey,
means, but I'm
nobody is.
comfortable
Well,
enough that I'm thinking
right.
I can shoot this in a match.
Right.
And then I walked up to shoot my first stage.
Oh
So
boy.
when I
Oh
go up to
boy.
shoot yeah, and it's, what they say, as soon as you hear that beep, you forget everything. And, and it's, of course, a table start. So I'm sitting at a table, unloaded. So I haven't even practiced unloading my revolver, and there's so many stages. I haven't shot my revolver left-handed, and there's all these stages is like something I've never done before. So I'm not freaking out because I'm like, well, I know how to be safe. But
Right.
as soon as the beep happened on that timer, you literally forget everything you're doing. You're going back to your, they say you never perform to your, to your highest level of training. You'll perform to your
Always.
lowest level of
Yep.
training, and that's kind of what happened. And
Okay.
the timer went off. I shot the stage. My buddy, who was also, he's a master in revolver. He's like, so how was it? And I was like, bro, I didn't remember anything. My whole focus is hitting my loads, hitting my reloads. And I did. And I
Okay.
was happy. And they went down and they scored the targets. And let's just say out of 6 stages, I ended up dropping 17 points total, which isn't that big of a deal, but it is for me
Well,
because I
yeah,
can shoot
listen, right. I mean, I don't think there's a person listening on this that doesn't know what caliber shooter you are, pun intended. But what I think is, I don't want to say admirable, but I think what's awesome about this is you did this, you challenged yourself, you went right at it, and you're like, you know what? I know that I'm going to have a problem here, but what I find even more kind of cool about this is what you identified during this as, as a training scar. I'll ask you another question about training scars down the road, but go ahead, continue.
But it took me about halfway through the match. I think we're at stage 4, and all my targets are, I get plenty of down zeros, but I have quite a few down ones at this point. And I get to start looking at my target. And I know notice the down ones, like all my shot groups are tight, but everything is like right below the down zero. Like that's where it's like the down zero, and then all my shot groups are below that. And I started looking at my targets like, holy cow, I'm shooting center mass. And I start to reflect, and it's like the reason why and I've never shot this many points down. I'm usually down 2, down 3, down 4 points for the total match.
Right. Now, just for the people that are not competition shooters, explain down 0, down 1.
So in IDPA, I should have a target behind me, but the IDPA target, there's a circle, and in a USPSA target, we always talk about high alphas. So a high alpha, the alpha zone is not in the center of the target. It's actually in where the organs are. And
Right.
It's a rectangular box that even if you jerk your trigger a little bit, you're still going to get in the high alpha. And then the Charlie zone is around that. And then you have a delta zone. Well,
Right.
on an IDPA target, you have a down 0, and that's a circle, 8, 10, maybe 8 inches. And it's high. It's high on the body. So it's not center mass. So it's training you to shoot high on a target.
There we go.
It's not
Right.
training to shoot somebody in the gut, in the stomach.
Right.
It's
Right.
training you to, it's still a game. You're still shooting a cardboard target, but it's
Right.
actually, you're establishing that unconscious competence, that muscle memory into shooting high.
Exactly. So, right. In the game over area of the gunfight, if you will.
Exactly.
But, so, and I think that's important for people to understand. So, and I think you're going to get to the target part in a minute. So we'll continue on with what's important, but
well, everybody talks about, oh, it's such a game, but that game teaches you some really important stuff.
100%
in these matches.
You remember the conversation that we had when we were in Tennessee with Kyle? He said,
Yep.
He's like, I will take a competition shooter for training all of the time over somebody that's not trained in that way, because that they can shoot. Then it's just applying different set of fundamentals, if you will.
Right. Skills.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah. But yeah, 4 stages into this, I'm looking at my shot groups, and, I was just pointing, points down. And then I was like, I'm so worried about shooting a revolver that I'm really not paying attention to anything else. And then I start self-reflecting and analyzing. I finally got to that, because it's been a while, and I finally get to that point on stage 4 that I was like, what is going on here? Why am I dropping so many points? It's like,
right.
I realize I'm rusty, but I got my own range. I've been shooting.
Exactly.
And then I start looking at my shot groups and notice everything is not high alphas and high down zeros. Everything is in the middle of all the targets. It's because I've established a training scar of shooting on B-27 targets for the last 2 years. And at that point, I was like, okay, I need to do better. You
Yeah.
know, I've recognized that. So the next stage, shoot higher. And as soon as that buzzer went off, I went back to my muscle memory
Yeah.
of, first of all, with the semi, it might have been different because I don't have to think about shooting a semi. But with the revolver, I'm thinking about the trigger pull. I'm
Right.
thinking about reloading. So what I'm not thinking about is the target because
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my gun.
Right.
And
Right.
every time I established a sight picture, sight alignment, you know, it automatically just went to the center of the target where it used to go to high alphas. And then I shot the
Right.
next stage and I'm like, shoot, I'm shooting center mass again. And it literally happened every stage. And that just proved that I'm not going to figure it out in a day.
No.
I have to come back to my range.
Yep.
I have to quit shooting at B-27 targets,
Now,
buy all new paper targets,
right.
and, you know, redo my training.
So is there a reason why you were shooting the B-27 targets?
Yeah, the focus training for a while, and I was doing a Maryland wear and carry class a lot.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so when I was teaching before I opened up my range, and it was doing a pretty good job. And that's the target that they choose to qual with.
Okay.
And I hate that target. I
Right.
hate it because it's, you know, you're already training people to shoot at the center. Well, I got, I don't know, 50,000 of them. I got them on sale. So I have it. So I was like, well, that's the target I'm going to train with.
Can you move them up?
So, but it's no excuse to, just because you
No.
have a ton of targets for the Maryland wear and carry doesn't mean
Right.
that I should be using them every time I go in the backyard and train. So, and it's on me. So,
Well, I mean, you know, you identified it quickly. Now, I guess going back to the target before I ask the next question. So I think that's an important takeaway for anybody out there that gets to do training or wants to do training or is doing training. You know, I remember when we used to do a lot of training and shooting at King 33 up here in Connecticut. And he had the silhouette blocks, like the movable targets. They were the, you know, like the rubber, whatever it is. But we didn't put targets on those. We used paper plates. And I know that even, I think Jamie and even Sanford, when we went down to North Carolina, there was Post-its or 3x5 cards, you know. And I never understood at the time. I didn't understand. I was like, well, why are we just shooting on paper plates? Why are we not shooting? I mean, I think a lot of times people get tunnel vision on the target and what that target looks like. They're always wanting to look at, see what the target looks like, right? Like see where their shot went. And I remember the instructor at the time saying, you know, don't focus on what the target looks like. That's why we just use paper plates. Like, you know, that's representative of probably that center ring or that alpha zone. Is there a better target for people to go out and train on, whether it's a flat range, whether it's a indoor shooting range, an outdoor flat range? I mean, is there a better target?
I mean, I think all targets have their place.
Right.
You know, I think the problem that we have nowadays, and I saw this the other day. I did a private training class for it was funny. He was actually he was a state cop, but he was a state cop instructor. A instructor for the state police, and then when he left there, then he's a town cop. And I'm sorry, there was a piece of fuzz right there. I wasn't shooing you away. But he's been a firearms instructor for the police for 20 years.
Right.
And he was a really good shot. And
Okay.
I was like, dude, why are you here? He's like, man, I want to do what you do. He's like, I want to go fast.
Yep.
And I was like, well, then go fast. He's like, I don't know how. He's like, I know how to shoot accurate. He's like, every qual that I've ever shot, there's a target, and I have enough time to shoot the X out of that target. But that is teaching us to shoot slow. So, if you have a target and you see it, I see it, trying to get somebody to quicken up their pace because they're bullseye shooters, because they can sit there and, they've been practicing on a
Keyhole and
3x5
shots.
card or the X of a B-27, and they're really good at shooting that. But when it's time for them to go fast, well, they have a grip. Their grip really isn't good enough to go fast. It's good enough to hold that pistol for a 2 or 3 second split, but to put do 0.2 second splits or sub, how good of a grip do you need? Well, a better grip than to sit there and bullseye shoot, I guarantee you.
Well,
But
Paul, can't they just be good enough?
I guess they can. I mean, what's the definition of good enough? I mean, that's something that we all talk about.
Exactly.
But I think it's important to switch it up.
Yeah.
I don't want to just, I got a bunch of still at my, on my range, a bunch of different paper targets. We talk about, when I teach a class, if I see somebody that's shooting the center out of their target, I tell them, you are not going fast enough.
Yeah.
You're not even training to go fast enough. Like, open that shot group up a little bit, see what your limits are. If you can shoot that center out, then how fast, I mean, you don't even know how fast you can go.
Right. Yeah. Keyholing a target is great, but if
means
it
nothing
takes,
to me.
well, right. If you're doing it in 10 shots and it's taking you 3 minutes, like you said, you're not really training. Sure, you're an accurate shooter with all the time in the world, but I think it goes back to, and this is why sometimes I enjoy having Jamie on. He's a movie guy. I don't know if you're a movie guy, but do you remember the scene in Robin Hood with it was with the Kevin Costner thing, and it was like, that's great that you can make that shot, but can you do it when it matters? And throw a distraction in there, throw a beep in there, throw a buzzer, or a malfunction, and what happens during that situation. So giving you all the time in the world to keyhole a target is just cool. You're accurate, but now, like you said, speed it up.
I mean, if that's the only way that you train, it's going to develop a training scar.
Right.
And that's just, pretty much what we're talking about right now. And it's nice and that's why I like competition so much. And we've discussed this, is usually when you go, when you go to a bunch of competitions and really start to get into it, every stage is different. So these guys that set up, something on their range or a certain skill, or, the bill drill, really easy to set up. Well, congratulations, you get good at the bill drill. But the fact is, if you just sit around and shoot 6 rounds all the time, that's going to develop into a training scar, because you're only shooting. I mean, I've developed one of those, and I was doing the bill drill so much, practicing to get that to 2 seconds, that whenever I would assign a drill to the class, I was like, okay, now we're going to shoot 8 rounds. They're like, okay, 8 rounds. And I always demonstrate everything. I'll shoot 6 rounds and stop.
Oh boy.
You're like, oh shoot, I still got to shoot 2 more rounds, because I was so used to shooting 6. I couldn't.
So,
and maybe I'm a Marine, so I was unable to count 7, 8. I don't know.
I think you're okay. So then, so a training scar gets established. I mean, how many have you identified over your entire time instructing and competing? I mean, are there a lot? Do you have a lot of these?
Oh yeah, I think hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah.
I would say, you shoot on a flat range. I mean, you could get 10, 20 training scars, if you actually think about it, just from standing and shooting on a flat range.
Right.
And stuff that you're telling yourself, okay, this is something that, because of the conditions that are set and the standards that are set at this range, I can't move.
Right.
I can't do this. Some ranges you can't shoot any faster. You can't draw from a holster. You can't shoot any. So if the only thing that you do is go to that range and shoot, imagine the scars you're going to develop. So you need to come to my range and take a ZERT class, and maybe in a month or 2. And I don't know.
There you go. There might be one coming up. It might be already coming up. it might already be up on the website, ready for registration. You never know. It might get linked right here. It might get linked right here in this video.
But it's
For
good to
those,
go out there and just there's just so many different ways to even dry firing, but dry fire can lead to training scars.
yep,
I mean, everything you do, if that's the only thing you do, and I'm pretty sure, like I said, Jamie could probably tell you another 100. I could sit here and just, one of the biggest things when I started competition shooting that my coach saw, and you want to go fast, but I did magazine changes the way that you do magazine changes in the military, and I developed scars. And he looked at my magazine changes one day. He's like, "Man, I can see exactly what you're doing." And we talked about it for a good 30 minutes. I was like, "Dude, nobody's ever said anything to me like this." And I just developed these scars where how many repetitions I practiced for probably a good solid month of doing magazine changes every day before. And the thing is, I can sit here and dry fire and do magazine changes
yep,
for 30 minutes every morning and evening. But in a match, when you're thinking about the stage, you're going to go back to the lowest level of training. And it wasn't, unconscious competence yet. And I can remember the day that it just came together and my magazine changes started to look better. And without me thinking about it, like I didn't have to think about how to
right,
do the magazine change correctly. It
yeah.
just was natural.
Well,
I probably 1,000 reps before
so
that started happening. It's
okay,
crazy.
well, so that brings up a good question. Obviously, a magazine change with a pistol with a rifle, um, I it's all up in your workspace, and your workspace is all up here, right, up in front of your face. Now, I think I saw a video of you with doing a mag or not doing a reload, not a mag change, doing a reload with the revolver, and it's not up there, right? I mean,
Oh
it's
no.
right. So it's
Because it's so
all
much faster if it's because you're literally there's so many more activities. Like a magazine changes might be 3 or 4 steps with a semi. With a
right.
revolver, it's like 6. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So it's definitely more, and you want that cylinder to be as close to your your
Oh,
not
the
trying
belt.
to your clips.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Oh,
said
yeah.
clips, but with a revolver, they are speed
The
clips.
speed
So
clips.
you
Yeah.
want that revolver to be as clipped because you're using gravity to kind of drop it in. So that
Now,
non-shooting hand.
now, moon clips or regular speed loaders that have like the button that you drop in, press the button, and then
I use
you're
moon
done.
clips.
You do
Yeah,
okay. Do you use
yeah.
moon? So
I
yeah,
found a revolver because I specifically wanted to use moon clips and not the
okay,
little speed loader button thing.
got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
that would.
right. Yeah. Well, no, that's good. I mean, there are with a pistol. It's simple. They're all magazine fed, right? So it's a box magazine type situation that is the same shape, and that's it. With the revolvers, you've got those speed reloaders, which are basically it's the shape of a cylinder with all of the bullets in it, and they've got a little push button, and you push it once you line them up, push it in, you push the button, and it releases um, all of the rounds, and then you're off to the races.
And some of
I,
the more high speed ones aren't even a button anymore.
oh
It's a little indentation that as soon as it's
oh,
hit on the bottom, as soon as it
it
hits the
drops them,
cylinder, it
it
releases.
releases them,
But there's
and
some
then
type of
yeah,
activation.
yeah, activation that has to happen. And then they make the speed strips, which are it's just a straight strip, and you can like you can get two in, then you have to peel it back, and you get two in, peel it back. Those are great if you are, I guess, carrying a revolver as a defensive pistol or a defensive handgun. If you choose to do it.
Yeah, and I have a revolver that I carry sometimes for, concealed carry, and I have those. And
Yep.
honestly, they're more comfortable in your pocket, but
Yeah.
that's another skill you got to get used to. So I
Oh yeah.
practice that.
Yep.
And
Yeah. One of the companies that we are friendly with is Neomag, and Neomag makes a um, revolver speed strip pocket clip. So basically, you feed that speed strip in there, and it's like a pocket clip. So it's sitting in there like your knife would be or your flashlight would be. So it's easier to get. Again,
and
I think all of
why am I just finally hearing about this? This is
There's this great thing in front of you. It's called the computer. On the computer, there's a thing called Google, and we call it the Google box.
You have to give me a class on this later.
I will train you. We'll get you off those training scars. You'll have to first take your computer out of the box that it came in.
That's a whole other podcast.
Whole other podcast. But those are things to train with. Just talking about mag loading. But would you consider that loading, that reloading with a revolver and a pistol, would you consider that a training scar or just training?
Can you rephrase
that? That's not really a training scar. I mean, if there's any kind of hang up,
I think your technique can lead, like, my military training developed a few training scars where I wasn't doing the fastest reload and I wasn't hitting reloads consecutively. And that's, my coach at the time, Pete, who was just an amazing coach out in Las Vegas, and he kind of looked at how I did stuff, and he even gave me like regimented training. It's like, hey, this is how we're going to work on this, and this is what I want you to focus on. It was really cool. And then what he gave me, I started teaching in my classes because it made so much sense.
Right.
And I hate the words working in your workspace, and I hate that because that can mean so many different things to people. I've seen working in your workspace and people have the gun like the whole way out here, because they're afraid. And to me, when you say working your workspace, that doesn't say anything to anybody, because it can be perceived. Well, if I'm looking down, my workspace is, I could be sitting at a desk and the computer's in front of me down. That's my workspace. And the way that he kind of described it, it's, when he changed my magazine changes, I was indexing my elbows. My elbows were getting at the same points each time. And when I really put emphasis on making sure my elbows were at the same spot, man, I started hitting my magazine changes. So then I started doing these drills. I got a couple of videos on it where I'll sit there, and in my USPSA rig, I'll have 5 magazines, and I'll just sit there with my eyes closed, and I'll hit every magazine change with my eyes closed because I'm indexing my elbows. I'm finding the exact spot where my elbows need to be. And my shooting elbow is at the same spot, which means my mag well is at the same spot. And then my non-shooting elbow is indexed at the same spot, which is put my magazine at the same spot. And I'm hitting 5 magazine changes in a row. And I would just keep doing magazine changes with my eyes closed, and I'd keep hitting them. And it's got nothing to do with workspace, because I can be in my workspace and it could be a different spot in my workspace every time. And it's that fine tuning, if that makes sense. That course adjustment is fine. You can say workspace, but when you're trying to fine tune and really tweak your fundamentals and make them, we talk about a perfect grip, perfect trigger control. You have to fine tune that stuff. And you got to get past those training scars that you developed of, stuff being good enough.
Yeah.
It's got to be, if you want to be, Jamie had we did that class in Oklahoma, and before that class, I don't know if it was, Jamie and I put together the classes of, these are all the classes that ZERT's going to teach. And he put out the curriculum for that class. And part of that was the definition of combat shooting.
Right.
And that I never really thought about the definition. I was like, wow, what the heck the definition? Because I know combat shooting. Shoot, I deployed for quite a few times, but it sat there, and it talks about, that definition talks about, not being, what it takes to not be in second place, because second place in a gunfight, there is no second place.
No.
And it talks about, you need to be putting accurate rounds downrange as fast as you can. And what does that take? It takes training, and it takes practice, and it takes fine tuning your fundamentals and all this stuff so you can shoot as fast as you can and keep the tightest shot group possible. It's not
Yeah.
sitting out there and doing slow fire. It's not
No.
out there and going fast and barely hitting the target.
Right.
It's shooting high alphas as fast as you can, down
Yeah.
zeros as fast as you can, because that's that area that you need to be hitting.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Train and practice and
Yeah.
conquer those scars.
So, so I guess the big question, is it possible to eliminate training scars? Because in real life, scars are permanent, man. I mean, what does it take for you to get rid of that training scar with the revolver, and how does it not come back?
For me, it's number one, it's recognition. You have to recognize that what you're doing is developing a scar, and
Sure.
how are you developing that scar? What's causing that? I hate saying 100% because it's not 100%, but I think this might be 100% is you're establishing a routine.
Right.
Like
Yep.
if you're driving the same route every day in a convoy in Fallujah, that's a routine that's going to get you killed. So you got to mix it up. And I
Right.
think our whole goal is to constantly mix it up. So
Yeah.
shooting one round. So one of the things we do in the military every time we go in the shoot house is shoot 2 rounds on each target. Well, now you've established the training scar of, I think I only need to shoot 2 rounds to drop a target. And I can tell you that is untrue.
Right. Right.
And I mean, overseas, we go into a house, there be guys on drugs, all coked up. Man, and I hate to go there on a video, but you got a 4-man team. We put 30 rounds into a bad guy that's all drugged up and he's still alive.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is wrong with my gun? Because I'm supposed to
Right.
only shoot him 2 times.
Yeah.
Because I've been taught 2 rounds. So that's a training scar that we've gotten the habit. So in a shoot house, everybody goes in, shoots 2 rounds, and it's like, well, shoot, that didn't work because you've developed a scar. So what do you do then? Shoot 3 rounds. Well, then that's developing a scar. So I think the whole goal should be constantly, whether you're doing drills, mix up your drills, mix up your training, how many rounds you put on target. I mean, everything. If you've established a routine of going out and all you do is the ORT drill in the morning, and then these are the drills I do, and then I end with the ORT to see how I improved, then you're developing scars.
Right.
You got to constantly mix it up and change up your routine. And I think that's the most important. And you kind of caught me off guard, but that's the best answer I could come up with at the moment.
No, listen, I think, I mean, that's great. And, that's what's so awesome about this platform is, we don't, guys, this isn't scripted. None of this is really, like there may be questions that somebody has jotted down that we want to kind of touch on with all this, but we go into this thing with that free flowing kind of model. Paul, he gave me a topic and I was like, yeah, let's touch on that. And then it's just kind of, we go with the flow here. So, I mean,
well, all this stuff, it's funny that you should bring that up because we literally talked about this yesterday on something that I mean, this weekend, I was like, man, I was like, you know what, this would be a pretty cool podcast. I'm going to run it across Chris. And maybe he'll be like, yeah, no, that's dumb, or we're not going to talk about this, or no, that's something that probably needs to be discussed, because I guarantee you, we're not the only two that this is going to happen to. It probably happens to everybody. But how many people out there think about it?
Well, right. I mean,
you get in your routine.
Yeah. And, is it more common with people that are shooting competitions over people that are just going out taking, 6, 7, 10 classes a year? I mean, but then they go back and they, and then they want to dry fire at home. And, you and I have talked about that numerous times with the dry firing, the practicing at home, what I do. And, a couple of weeks ago, you're like, okay, do you pull the trigger? And he was like, and I said, yeah. He's like, you stop pulling the trigger. stop
Well,
pulling
only
the
for
trigger
one
when you,
drill.
well, only for one
Yeah,
drill, right? But
yeah.
yeah, like, um, but my training scar was exactly that. Like dropping a mag, loading it up, presenting, finding the sights, finding the dot, whatever, focus, slow squeeze, pull the trigger, break, reset,
So
do it
one of the
again.
things that I've seen in a class, especially with new shooters, when we start dry firing, what do you need to do when you dry fire? Every time you pull the trigger, you have to tell them to, reset the hammer,
Right.
jack the slide, pull the
Right.
slide back. And then as soon as they load that first round, because they've just dry fired for 30 minutes to an hour, they shoot the first round and then they pull the slide back and you see a
Yep.
round come out. It's like, you're shooting a semi-auto and they're like, oh, I'm used to it. And
Yeah.
that's a training scar
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
all they know is, so they've done so many reps that they're not used to their gun. Now, if I ever do that, then you can like fire me as an instructor, because I've got enough reps. But for a brand new shooter, trying to get them to dry fire, and then
Right.
you want them to go home and dry fire, the first time they go to a range after that, they're going to shoot and then jack the slide. A round's going to come out. And they're going to be like, "What happened?"
Yeah.
Oh, it's a semi,
Yeah.
buddy.
Yeah.
But
You don't
that's,
need to do that.
yeah, it's
Um,
another training scar, just like everything else. Now, you before you go on, it's
yeah,
funny
go ahead.
because there's that whole world out there that, tactical shooters hate competitive shooters, and competitive shooters are like, oh, tactical shooters.
Right.
I feel, and I've done them both, and I see the benefit of taking tactical classes because I teach them, but I also see the benefit of shooting competitions because I shoot them, and I know shooting competitions have made me a better shooter,
Right.
made me a faster shooter, made me more accurate. My draws faster, my fundamentals are faster. Everything is more fine tuned because I've worked on that stress. But I
Right.
honestly believe that if all you do is competition shooting, you're going to develop scars because that's all you do is competition shooting. And
Yeah.
so you need to get out there, and the group of guys that I shot with on Sunday or on Sunday, they're all competition shooters, and they're all like experts and masters. They're really good competition shooters, and they're all coming to my house next weekend and taking a tactics class, which
Oh,
is
that's
really
gonna be
awesome
awesome.
because
Yeah.
they want to,
Yeah.
and they carry CCW, but they're dusting their ARs out, and they don't know what a sling is. Some of them
Ooh,
do, but
boy.
some of this stuff, I mean, the way to set up how many three gunners have never put a sling on an AR, because you
Right.
don't do that in the three gun world. So to
Yeah.
properly set up a sling to make it, make sense. I mean, it
Yeah. Yeah, they're all gonna
kind of
need the,
kind of gets exposed to that.
yeah, they'll all need the vertical foregrips and all.
Nobody's showing. They already know not to show up with a glass with a gangster grip.
Yeah,
I already
totally
put that
doing
out
that.
there.
So, uh, what are some of the other training scars that you have seen during your instructing time, and how do you A, approach the student, and B, get them on the path to fix it?
Oh my goodness. Well, most of the time in my classes, I talk about, as the big one of the biggest, I see this with competition shooters is competition shooters are afraid to break the 180, because in a
Right.
competition you can't
Yep.
break the 180. So I taught a ZERT class down in Texas a couple years ago, and two of my friends are professional three gunners, and they took the class. And every time they went to break contact, they were like, even though it's a 360-degree range, they would not break the 180 with their rifle. And so I do drills to make them break the one. It was crazy because it was like a magnet. They didn't want to pull that rifle or that pistol
Oh, wow.
away. So I had them bound around each other. Well, bounding around each other, you can't keep the gun downrange because they were going to point them at each other. So
Right.
I don't know. I develop skills, or if I see somebody having an issue, I will, do a quick little change the drill up just to make them break that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we always talk about flat range shooting. Usually when you go to an indoor and outdoor range, you're standing in a box, you can't move, you can't break the 180. There's so many things you can't do.
Right.
So, I mean, the typical ranger ready up is, face to the left, face to the right. So right there, you're literally breaking the 180,
Oh yeah.
just to get people out of that flat range mentality. And you got
Yeah.
to do those drills. So why not do them in a class like mine where now it's completely controlled. Nobody is pointing guns at each other. Nobody's flagging each other. But one of my favorite drills is like face me, face up range. And when
Oh
I give
yeah.
the command ready, you
Yep.
look in the direction you're turning. So everybody's getting out of their comfort zone because they had to break the 180. So, and
Yeah.
people are like, I'm too close to the person in front of or
Yeah.
beside me, and they get all
Yeah.
paranoid. You've said this
Right.
before. And then after a
Well,
couple drills, you establish confidence and competence.
well, I, I think I said it just looking at a liability standpoint, but again, I mean,
But that's stuff
just
to
because,
consider also.
right, you've got to take a look at all of it. I mean, when you start getting to that elevated level of training classes, um, it, you're in the big boy leagues or the big girl leagues, however you want to put it. When you're doing stuff inside of vehicles, that is the big girl leagues at that point, and you got to understand that safety is next level at that point. So you
No, I
know,
agree with you on that, but also, and this is a discussion that we've talked about is, and I don't believe in the word, there's organizations out there that they teach basic classes and advanced classes. And I hate the word advanced. We've talked about this.
we know
And
this,
advanced tactics is just the basics done better. It's just the
right?
basics fine tuned. And but everybody that takes a class, most of the people that take classes already have their concealed carry permits. So if
Yep.
you're only teaching them the flat range mentality, the basics, because they're not ready for, a 360-degree range. So we should only keep them on a 180-degree range. Well, guess what? They're leaving that class and
Well,
they're
the world is
carrying,
right.
and it's
The
the
world,
world is a 300.
yeah,
So they
is
need to get used to maneuvering and
oh,
and acting and being safe. And I think that's, you
oh, I
know,
agree,
that's one of those
100%.
training scars that you need to develop as soon as you can, while
Right.
also being safe.
Right. I mean, the first time that I experienced that 360-degree live fire range that we had here, King 33. I mean, yeah, I was like, holy cow, this is pretty wild. Even running a drill with a guy where we were both sides of the hallway, if you will, and checking opposite doors and having to take shots. I mean, you know, um, there's a level of okay, you know, I got this, no problem. We're gonna do, just go slow until you are ready to go fast. Um, but that first time that somebody goes from shooting on a piece of paper hanging 7 yards in front of them that doesn't move to drawing from a holster, having to get off the X to then moving in and around a vehicle and then bounding and whatnot with another person, that's all, that's all progression, which is awesome. But in that, you're going to have to, I guess, identify any training scars that could lead to a problem or an unsafe situation.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why in a situation, I mean, I've never been up there. I was never invited, just saying. Uh,
Paul, that was
but
before my time
I know.
as the
For anybody else who might be listening on this
as the
show.
chief.
But
Listen,
so
it
in that
wasn't.
scenario, I got to ask, where was the RO? Like, where was the safety? Were they on the floor with you? Were they
Yes. No.
watching a
Yes.
monitor, like
No.
on a,
Right
okay,
behind. Right behind.
okay. So, I mean, and this is, and I talk about this all the time in my classes. Classes are safe because you have your instructor, a safety officer, some type of safety there that should be a step back to look at the big picture.
Right.
So if anything's about to happen, that person should be trained well enough
Of
and
course.
have
Right.
experience enough to see that develop to basically stop anything from happening before it happens.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that I'm trained well enough and I've gone through enough schools and courses and stuff that I can project and I can see stuff before they happen. But in the streets, in the real world, there's no safety.
Yeah, that's true.
There's
Yep.
it's just you.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that RO, if you're depending on that RO, that's a training scar. That's something that, and I'm not saying, go out and do shenanigans, and because in
No,
that
no.
environment you need it, and
Right.
stuff, but be prepared if a situation happens, man. You got to come up, when I teach a 2-person tactics class, I'm usually helping that team along. I'm helping
Right.
giving them the answers. At the end of it, we do an AR,
Right.
and you got to pay me a lot of money if you want me there when you go to Walmart every day, to be that third person and that RO
Yeah.
kind of standing behind you just
Oh
because
yeah.
whatever. But I mean, anything could be, but the thing is like, like we said, like we talked about, it's that routine that, man, anything can happen. So just be ready, be prepared, and, be ready for anything. And semper gumby, be flexible.
Semper Gumby. Okay.
Always
Um,
flexible.
always flexible. So do you think that your training scars alone, no, because you had already said that you were not expecting to win this match. So take the training scars out. What would it have changed from your match performance over the weekend?
I think it would have just put, I mean,
Do you
we
think
talk
you would? Okay, so let me ask you the brain.
my points
What
down
place did?
definitely would have been better,
Okay, what
so
place? What place did you come in at the match? Do you mind
last.
telling
I already
everybody?
told you I
Last
came in
place.
last. I'm
Okay.
shooting a revolver.
Listen, I
So
know that you told me, but I wanted you to say it. Okay, I didn't want to be like, yeah, you came in last, ball.
So just for the
So
record, I mean, these group of guys are amazing. I
yeah.
mean, they
So hey,
between
listen,
daylight
you're
savings, they shoot every Wednesday, but there were 3 revolver shooters there.
okay.
So I wasn't the
Listen,
only revolver.
you
One was a
Paul,
master. Those 2 guys been shooting revolver for a
right.
while. I already knew I was coming in
Okay,
last.
listen, you're amazing. Okay, how's that? Does that make you feel better? So, so you came in last. If you walked into that match with no training scars and you were shooting high alphas, would you have come in last?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so it wouldn't
I don't
have you wouldn't have beaten the other more well-rounded revolver shooters, but you would have done better. I mean,
Yeah, I don't.
I'm
I mean, if you talk to most people that when we've talked about this, and maybe you're trying to get information. When I shoot a match, I'm not out there trying to beat anybody. I'm trying to beat my performance from the week before. And even though I've never shot a revolver before, I know I could have shot that better if I didn't
so
have that scar.
right,
Like my standard is still
right.
shoot an IDPA match. My standard is 0 points down.
Okay.
So
So
shooting 17 points down, it doesn't matter if I'm reloading with the revolver. I know I can shoot accurate.
right. So when you go out to compete, you are competing against yourself. You're always trying to beat your last performance, your last time out there.
Exactly.
And I think that's the key takeaway for all of this is don't be worried about what the other people on the range are doing, how they're shooting, what their targets look like. Be concerned on yours and how your target looks at the beginning of a training class and then at the end of the training class. What did you put together to improve? And it's
Or
not
from day
about
to day,
yeah,
or week to week, or month to
right.
month.
Yeah. Whether you're, you're doing weight loss, whether you're out there running every day because you want to get into running fitness, whatever it is, you have a starting point and you have an ending point. You're not going up every day and looking what other people weighed in at or what they ran. You're competing against yourself all the time. And that's what you need to focus on. I mean, you know, and I correlate it back to just Clark Armory side. You know, I mean, when I sit there and I talk to my marketers, like, well, what are these guys doing? What are these guys doing? I don't care what they're doing. I care what I'm doing. I care how we're doing. And that's it. Identify your training scars. And I'm going to ask you one question. You were able to identify yours. Do you think it's easy for people to identify their own training scars, or does it take somebody to maybe point it out?
I think it's experience level. I think the more experience you have, the more you could probably when I teach a class, when somebody shoots a shot somewhere that's not in the center, I usually ask them, it's like, what happened on that shot? And most people, they're like, I don't know. I aimed at the center of the target, I pulled the trigger, and it hit there. I can tell you exactly what happened. I guarantee you, if Jamie had a flyer, if he was shooting the ORT drill and he had a flyer, he could say, yep, I did something on one shot. And he's like, yep, that was the shot right there. The
Right.
more you do this, the more you can kind of self-evaluate, through a drill. And I think that self-evaluation, constant self-evaluation, is important in finding these scars and establishing that stuff. Anytime you're a brand new anything, you're figuring it out to the point where you don't have all the answers. But the more you do it, the more you fine tune, the more you're looking at the grip. As soon as I come out of the holster and I grip that firearm, I mean, I know whether or not that grip is perfect because I've done it thousands of times. Where a new shooter's like, well, it felt perfect. Well, it evidently wasn't.
Right.
But I think the more you train and the more you practice, which is why training and practicing as important as it is, the more, it's the easier it is for that self-reflection and evaluation. And when you do that, you can kind of see, where a lot of this stuff is, can develop into, scars.
Yeah.
And then you make those changes.
Yeah. And I think, I guess that's the second half of the takeaway here is these scars are not permanent scars. Developing training scars over time is probably very common. Like you said, you've got hundreds of them over time, and probably most people do. And we're not just talking firearms. It's like, probably can transfer over to other parts of your life. They're not permanent. They can be fixed. It's just recognizing what it is and then taking a look at how to fix it. You were able to identify what you needed to do to fix yours. And I think, like you said, recognizing it was number one. And I think the next part of it is just repetition, right?
Yeah. I mean, what I don't do from this point is keep putting B-27 targets on the range and think that it's going to fix itself.
Yeah.
I have to make a change. I literally have to. I can't sit here and think about making the change. I have to put that change into action and buy targets, and sit there and undo all the scars that I've established within the last 2 years. And how many rounds is that going to take? Well, who knows, until I get to the point where I don't have to think about it. And I'm shooting high alphas and high zeros and putting rounds back into, Lord forbid something happened in the streets. I'm not shooting a bad guy in the gut.
No. Well, listen, folks, I hope that this episode made you sit back there and kind of take a look at a more elevated, I guess, altitude, if you will, to what some of your possible training scars look like. If you have any, I'd love to hear about them. I'd love to hear about what you did to fix it. If it was, I don't want to say is easy to identify, but if it was something that you identified, or if it was something that was pointed out to you by an instructor, more than likely an instructor will, like you said, point out what training scars you have based on their skill level. So great conversation, Paul, as always.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that that's one of the things that Jamie constantly hits on in his classes, and I make it a point. And like you said, it might be somewhere up there in a corner. We do have a class coming up, and we talk about
Right
training
there.
scars, and we're going to get out of the norm,
Yeah.
and kind of get away from, certain drills and certain things that you can do on your own in a flat range. And we're going to have some fun and put some rounds down range, but get something out of it, and maybe give you guys a couple, a new routine
Okay. All
that
right.
you can kind of add to your tool, a new tool to add to your toolbox
Yeah.
to kind of, get out of your, not only get out of your comfort zone, but
Good deal. And
kick those
what,
scars to the curb.
and here's the other thing, just to really just elevate your stress level, all of it will be documented those 2 days. A video camera, a drone, all will be going. So get
Not going to be
ready.
live, is it? Just
No,
tell
it's
me
not
it's
going
not
to be
going to be
live.
live.
No live, no live. But we're going to have a good time, folks. Just like we had a good time today. So thank you all for spending some time with us as usual, listening or watching this show. We appreciate any feedback and comments down in the section below, whether it's on YouTube or the podcast. Unless it's just spiteful, hateful comments, then you can keep that to yourself because it gets us nowhere. But great stuff. And as always, you guys stay safe out there, and we'll see you again soon. ZP002.
Mr. X out.